What is going on, YouTube people? Northeast Ohio Cards and Comics here. For something a little different today, we are going to talk about diversifying your collection slash investment slash portfolio when it comes to the wonderful world of collectibles. You know, the primary focus of this channel is sports cards, and we spend a lot of time on sports cards. We also talk about comic books on occasion, and also, Marvel trading cards and whatnot. And I just kind of wanted to talk about why I personally kind of ventured into the world of comic books and why I think it's good to pick something besides just sports cards. Before we do, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff down below. And as a bonus, today's video is sponsored by our favorite, MySlabs.com. For those that don't know, MySlabs, 1% seller fees plus PayPal goods and services for any graded sports cards and comic books. They do also offer comic books. You can sell your CGC and I believe CBCS slabbed books over there with those wonderful seller fees. And the other nice thing about MySlabs is they weed out bad actors. They are very aggressive about removing bad sellers and buyers from the platform. And if it's anything like me, I've had a lot of no payers on eBay lately, and I have not had that problem on MySlabs to this point. So, quick word from our sponsor, and then we will go ahead and dive into today's topic.
Tired of paying 10%, 15%, or more to sell your cards, comics, and digital collectibles? How does 1% sound? Too good to be true? Well, not anymore. MySlabs.com is the web's premier user-driven marketplace for buying and selling slabbed cards, sealed wax, and now slabbed comics and digital collectibles. So the next time you're forced to pay 10% or more to sell something from your collection, head over to MySlabs.com and join the 1% revolution.
Once again, thank you to the sponsor of today's video, MySlabs. Let's go ahead and dive in today. So, we have a lot of different choices. Even in sports cards alone, you have a lot of different choices, and it's smart to diversify even on that. For example, a lot of people will collect basketball, football, and baseball. Some will collect two of the three, maybe throw in hockey into the mix, or UFC, or F1, or whatever. But I do think it's important to diversify across not just multiple different sports, but also outside of sports cards. And I'm not going to listen. I chose comic books. It's for me. I enjoyed comic books more than sports cards as a kid growing up, to be quite honest. And my passion kind of reignited for it over the pandemic, and I dove back in. And I, in addition to having passion for it, I also saw a lot of opportunity in it because of some of the things that the comic book market hadn't caught on to that we as sports card investors had. We were used to quick flipping, churn and burn, the grading game, how pop reports matter, supply and demand, that sort of stuff. And, the comic book market was kind of sleeping on some of that stuff at the beginning of the year. And then they saw rapid expansion in prices, and their people in their market didn't know what the hell was going on. Now, some of that stuff was pulled back, but it has leveled out at newer highs. The biggest advantage, and I've talked about this before on the channel, the biggest advantage that gave me was it saved me. It saved my butt. Because when I saw the comic book market at lows, I shifted my money from buying sports cards into comic books. And why did that save me? It was because at the same time, I was looking at the sports card market, and a lot of that stuff was expensive. I was still buying sports cards, don't get me wrong. I didn't stop. I bought, Donovan Mitchell at an all-time high. I bought Luka, not all-time, but very high. I bought Luka premier level at a pretty high price compared to where it ended up going. Some of that stuff is rebound. Some of that stuff I'm still very upside down on. But it saved me from putting even more money into the sports card market because I saw an opportunity in another collectible market to put money into that market at what I thought was not an all-time low point by any means, but an undervalued point. So instead of pumping more money into sports cards, paying a high, I saw an opportunity in a different field that was at the low. Now, the key is I'm still trying to keep it in the collectible world. Obviously I could have taken that money, put it in a 401k, crypto. I don't know anything about crypto, NFTs, whatever, pick your thing. I'm specifically talking about the collectible market. I am sure if you were watching this video, there is something else that you are into beyond sports cards that very may well have collectible value to it. Maybe it's Magic cards, maybe it's Pokemon, maybe it's Yu-Gi-Oh, maybe it is comic books, maybe it's Marvel cards, maybe it's video games, maybe it's something else that no one is thinking of yet. And that's the key. Is there something you are into that has potential for collectability that maybe the market has not taken off on yet? This one has kind of picked up because of the whole video game stuff, but like graded Nintendo Powers, the old classic Nintendo Power covers from when I was a kid, those do quite well and are fun to buy, especially if you have nostalgia for that sort of stuff. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so Nintendo Power to me was a massive deal. I remember having a subscription from it from day one. I wish I still had them because I had a very large run of them. Remember them coming in the mail every single month, being super excited for it. Another market that's starting to kind of pick up and is actually, there's not a lot of them out there in some stuff, but they sell very well and could be potentially undervalued. I haven't done any research on it, but graded Sports Illustrated, that sort of stuff. Look into other graded sporting magazines, sending those things off to CGC, the same people that grade comic books, and there could be a market in play for that. The key point is that it gives you options when one market goes sideways versus another. Something doesn't feel right about the basketball market at this point in time, or the football market, or baseball, or whatever. Instead of only having the other sports to swing into, you can look at something completely different. And what I found diving into the comic book market was I felt I had a leg up coming from the mentality of sports cards. That market wasn't used to seeing that sort of mentality, and that could be, I haven't done any research into SI, graded Sports Illustrateds, or Nintendo Powers, or video games. I know Dustin, Personal Finance Dad, has spent a lot of time digging into the video game market. Not my scene, I don't plan on diving in, but maybe it is for you. Regardless, if you've been in the sports card game for even a year, through this last year and a half, you probably understand the ups and downs of a collectible market better than a lot of the people already in that field, depending on what it is. And even comic books was a very mature market, but they weren't ready for what happened to it and as quickly as it happened. So I just think there's a lot of edge there to be had. And it also, once again, kind of helps protect you from, if something doesn't feel right in the current thing that you're in, it allows you to branch out into something new and potentially put money into something different to also diversify yourself. We don't know what's going to happen. Fanatics, our future Borg overlords, are coming to take over everything. And personally, I actually think it might be not as terrible as some people are making it out to be. The video coming soon for that one. There's maybe some optimism there, but I could see how you could have some pessimism. Maybe the whole thing comes tumbling down. If the sports card market comes tumbling down, it's nice to have some diversification in some other markets. For me, that's comic books. Once again, I chose comics because I had a vested interest in it as a youth, and I still follow it all the way through. I'm a big fan of the MCU and what Marvel's doing, and I think it has a ton of potential still. There's tons of nostalgia there. There's still tons of new people coming into the market because of what Disney's been doing, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. The other nice thing, specifically about comic books, is you don't have to worry about injuries. With a lot of this other stuff, you don't have to worry about injuries either. If you're buying graded Mario Brother carts, you don't have to worry about Mario getting hurt. You don't have to worry about Spider-Man getting hurt or doing something stupid. And specifically, once again, on the comic book side, that stuff, to me anyways, as long as you're not buying at the absolute peak of prices, has very high floors to it. A first appearance of someone in a comic book of a key character is always going to have a lot of value. Giant Size X-Men #1 is always going to be a book people want. Yes, supply and demand can vary over time and prices could fluctuate over time. But where I put most of my money on the comic book side was specifically aimed at long-term holds. Things that I could put money into, set them aside, and just kind of forget about them for years. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. On the sports card side of things, we typically don't do that unless you're buying, GOAT level cards, Jordans, LeBrons, KDs, whatever, players that have major established background, vintage stuff. On comic books, there a lot more stuff has high floors just because of kind of the nature of the beast. It's always going to be X character's first appearance. So that book is always going to hold some type of value. Once again, you don't want to be buying at absolute peak crazy times. So you still have to be smart about it, but there's just a lot higher floor. A lot of sports cards, whether we all like to hear this or not, look in your case. Flip through your Zion case right now, or your Firebox, or whatever it is that you use, your homemade thing. Flip through it. Unless it's loaded with vintage, if it's mostly modern and ultra modern, spoilers, most of the stuff in there probably is going to be worth a fraction of what it is today. It's the nature of the beast. These players come and go quicker than most of us realize, and most of them do not hold a ton of value long term. There's a few people from each generation that actually hold good long-term value. So that's why I also like moving in and out of sports cards as fast as possible. Comic books, you don't have to do that. It's not a flip game. And some of the other stuff I wouldn't imagine you'd have to either. If you went out and got, a Sports Illustrated with LeBron's first cover appearance on it, that's something you could sit on and hold. Or some other classic SI cover. Or the first Nintendo Power is always going to be relevant. Once again, it could have swings up and down in prices, but there's always going to be relevancy to that. So the point of this video is just to encourage you to look into some other type of market. Like I said, I prefer comic books. I would love to see you enter the comic book market. I think it's absolute blast. They make great display pieces. They look great in an office. There's the whole MCU vibe behind it, but maybe that's not for you, and I understand that. But I have to imagine each of us has something that we're attached to beyond sports cards, and maybe you haven't thought about investing money into it. Maybe you played Magic as a kid and you loved it. You have nostalgia for it. You could put a little bit of money into there, turn it into a little PC, and also look to see if there's an investable angle on it. So that's all I have for you guys and girls today. Go check out a different collectible market from the one you were already in. If you were primarily in sports cards, go look at something else. If you're primarily in comic books, go look at something else, whether that's sports cards, video games, Nintendo Powers, SIs, whatever, something completely different that I didn't even mention. Do your research on it. As always, dig in, do your homework before you start spending money. Spend hours on YouTube, read Reddit, read, social media, get a vibe for what's going on in that market, and then apply the knowledge that you have from the market you are in and see where you could leverage that. So that's all I got for you guys and girls. Once again, go check out myslabs.com for all your buying and selling needs of both sports cards and comic books. Catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.